Look, it's been revealed that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has unleashed on Kamala Harris. He sat down for an interview where he really unleashed about what Kamala Harris wrote about him in her book. He said that it was utter BS. This was in an interview with The Atlantic. And Josh Shapiro denied what Harris alleged in her book, 107 Days, which included discussions of Shapiro and others that she vetted to be her running mate. And then she landed with Tim Walz, which was an absolute disaster. But Josh Shapiro said, I can tell you that her accounts are just blatant lies. Nick, this book, 107 Days, it just keeps infuriating the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris continues on her self-immolation tour here. This is someone who was, uniquely unqualified to run for president, got in there under the unique circumstances of, President Biden dropping out of the race. And it goes to show just how lucky we are to have dodged this bullet as a country, because clearly this is someone who doesn't have the temperament to lead the country going forward. And I think really what this shows and is endemic of is the fact that the Democrats are still, in search of a leader for their party here. And, Kamala Harris is trying to continue to establish herself and to distance herself from the failure that was her presidential campaign. But my goodness, making every other up and coming Democrat angry and trying to throw folks like Josh Shapiro under the bus, who have a much better reputation than she does right now. I don't know that that's the way to do it.
Let's talk about Tim Walz, who is, of course, at the centre of this massive fraud scandal, because under his watch in Minnesota, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars have reportedly been going to Somalia. Now, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has launched a federal investigation into claims that Minnesota tax dollars were siphoned to the terrorist group Al-Shabaab under the Biden administration and Governor Tim Walz. And allegation, he said, demands urgent scrutiny. Now, this fraud scandal, Army, has raised concerns around what else is going on in Minnesota under Tim Walz. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem revealed today that half of all visa holders in Minnesota submitted fraudulent applications. She said, you told me to look into Minnesota and their fraud on visa and their programs. 50% of them are fraudulent, which means that wacko Governor Tim Walz either is an idiot or he did it on purpose, and I think that he's both. So, Army, I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that is both. And of course, look, just because you had a visa approved, there's no law that says you have to be in this country. And if certainly you were trying to, you fraudulently try to acquire a visa, you can and probably should be shipped out of this country. This is an incredible, really a truly incredible story that's barely being covered by the mainstream media. And when it is, it's being covered all wrong. I'll talk about that in a second. But again, you're talking about $1 billion was stolen through fraud from the American people. And just in terms of context, right? What $1 billion here and $1 billion there, all of a sudden we're talking about real money. $1 billion is more than 4 times what Minneapolis, the biggest city in Minnesota, spends on their entire law enforcement budget. Okay.
Wow.
And that, that money was spent, as they said, on with luxury cars and real estate in Turkey and Nigeria. And by the way, I looked it up. Your real estate dollars go very far in Nigeria. I can only imagine what kind of palaces, what kind of villas they're paying with that. And oh yeah, of course, like you said, it's going to terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. What I find so curious is that they stole $1 billion, but only gave a few million to Al-Shabaab. Like that's less than 1% of what they stole. I mean, come on, guys. If you really feel strongly about it, that's really selfish to keep most of the money for yourself. Okay, I'm just saying. But Walz is incredible, right? So first of all, he knew about this for years. This is not brand new. He's known this for years. but has been afraid because of he didn't want to have smack of racism, right? And some kind of anti-Somalian bent in Minnesota, because they're a really huge part of the Democratic Party in Minnesota. And there's an American Somali legislator who said the quiet part out loud. He said, look, the reason why this is ignored is because we are so powerful in the Democratic Party. And that there was an X account that we're not exactly 100% sure whether or not it was real or not, but there was an X account that purported to represent 500 people from Human Services in Minnesota who said they were threatened when they brought up this issue to Waltz and his people. So yeah, that is an incredible indictment of Waltz. But unbelievably, he was on Meet the Press, and they spent more time on Meet the Press talking about how President Trump called him a retard than they spent on this actual serious issue, the scandal of scandals in Minnesota. They spent more time talking about that stupid issue than this issue. And he took no responsibility for what went on. In fact, he went on the offense, and the host of Meet the Press had no follow-up questions, no pushback, no nothing. It was unbelievable. Look, there is an issue with the Somali community. Okay, I went there. I've been there actually a couple times interviewing the Somali community. There's an issue with assimilation. you just can't get away around it, okay? Where I asked them whether or not they should live under American law, Sharia law. They wanted to live under Sharia law. They felt that Somalia was a better place for them if they're living here. And this is not really, again, an anti-Africa issue. Nigerian immigrants are among the most successful immigrants in our country, economically, education. It's not about that. Somalis just are not assimilating as other cultures are, and we have to look into that.
And you made the point that this is barely being covered on the mainstream media. Of course, New York Times reported on it, but looking at the coverage, ABC News Tonight didn't touch it. NBC's Nightly News, CBS Evening News also has not mentioned Tim Waltz by name in the past week, Army, while all of this is going on and this is being revealed. This is according to reports out of Fox News. And they also didn't use the terms Somali or Somalian. They were not used in any of the three newscasts in the past week. And it's a huge part of this scandal, as you say. Look, let's listen to Caroline Levitt on Tim Waltz.
About how Somali immigrants in Minnesota have been ripping off American taxpayers. In fact, 86 people have been charged in a rampant and widespread fraud scheme spanning multiple programs in Minnesota. Of those 86, 78 of those people are Somali, 91% of them charged. So far, 59 of those people have been convicted for their roles in fraud plots that have stolen $1 billion from taxpayers. In one scheme, and this is egregious, a nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claimed to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya.
I mean, this scandal is extraordinary, Army. Will Tim Waltz be able to survive this? Surely he should be resigning.
Well, he's coming up for election, and the problem is Minnesota is a pretty blue state. I mean, Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, is a full-on crazy person. He was giving a press conference, just broke into Somali like randomly. So will he survive? I mean, I think he might. I think he will survive because he's got allies in the Democratic Party and obviously allies in the media. If the media's not covering this, this is not going to break out and pick up enough steam for him to lose power. So yeah, I think he's going to survive. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
And he could have been the vice president. Kamala Harris and Tim Waltz. Can you imagine that?
God.
I know.